Thank you, Alina. It's such a privilege to be here. With Judge Katzmann's help and leadership, IJC has changed the lives of so many, and I'm so proud to have served as a fellow. I remember every child and every family I've helped. I carry all of their stories with me because it's also my story. Like my clients, I'm an immigrant, and their journeys were just like mine. My sister and I grew up in Honduras. My mother single-handedly raised us while working as a civil engineer, a brave and unusual choice for a woman to go into a field dominated by men. She was the head engineer of a project that built 500 homes for low-income families. And when Hurricane Mitch devastated Honduras in '98, my mother helped lead the government's recovery efforts. She was the head of a government agency, but when her political party lost power, my family became a target. My uncle was viciously murdered and the police refused to investigate. Losing him was really hard. He was like a father to me. Eventually, my mother lost her job, and that's when the threats began. We'd get phone calls to our house threatening to rape my sister and me or to kill my mother. I was 13 and terrified. My sister and I almost never left the house. Someone killed our dog, Raisa, and we nearly lost my mom when somebody tried to assassinate her. We had to go. We were left with no other choice. In our darkest hour, the United States was a beacon of freedom. It offered safety and a new life for my family. So when I was 15, we left Honduras and we stayed with my aunt in New Jersey. I remember just walking around the neighborhood. It felt so good to be outside and safe. I hadn't been able to do that in Honduras for years. So I just walked and walked and walked. But the magic wore off when we were struck by the reality of our situation. We had fled Honduras before our papers were finalized. When we consulted an immigration attorney, she told us that we shouldn't have come and that all we could do was wait. Now that I'm an immigration attorney, I know that she was a terrible lawyer. She wouldn't answer our questions, refused to talk to us, and didn't explore other options. Immigration law is the only type of law you don't have to pass the bar to practice. So the field is filled with incompetent lawyers and scammers who prey on immigrants. But we were new to this country and didn't know any better. We believed our lawyer. Our aunt had recommended her. Who else could we trust? We were waiting for our papers and the process was milking us dry. We used nearly all the money we had from selling our home in Honduras on legal fees. We lived in constant fear. We worried that my mother would be stopped by the police one day and be deported and that we'd never see her again. And when it came to finding a job, my mom didn't have a lot of options. So my mother, this incredibly accomplished civil engineer who was at the top of her field, was left with no choice but to scrub floors on her hands and knees as a housekeeper. It was so hard watching her walk out of the house in the morning in her cleaning uniform. We were safe, but the cost was my mother's career and her pride. I thought that if I studied hard, I could get a job and make enough money so my mom would never have to wash another floor. So I poured all my energy into law school. I had always been a good student, but everything was harder here because it was in English. I spoke French and Spanish, but English was a struggle. So I completely immersed myself. By the end of the year, I went from having the worst grades in English to having the best. Just as I was finally getting used to my new life, my body began to feel wrong. About a year after we got here, I injured my foot and the pain grew worse and worse. We didn't have insurance. I had to pretend I got into a bad accident so I could go to the emergency room and get doctors to look at my leg. They ran some tests and I wasn't ready for what they found. I had a tumor growing in my foot. It was cancer. When you're 17, that's the last thing you expect to hear. I was overwhelmed, not just by this terrifying disease, but about the treatment. We couldn't afford it. I was in for another surprise. The doctor said that I had such a rare form of cancer that they would pay for everything because they wanted to study it. The next few months were a blur. They took me to a special facility in Philadelphia and amputated my foot. Afterwards, I was in so much pain. But I was lucky. Living in this country saved my life. I wouldn't have been able to get the care I needed in Honduras. As soon as I recovered, I went back to school and threw everything I had into academics. I graduated on time with honors. I managed to get a scholarship for one semester at a small local college, but didn't know what to do after that. In the middle of my first years, our papers finally came through. 3 years after coming to the US, we could finally live without fear, and we were free to pursue our dreams. With my green card, I was eligible for financial aid, so I transferred to Rutgers. I graduated at the top of my class with 2 majors and 2 minors and went straight to law school. That's where I saw the immigration process from a different point of view. I volunteered to be a translator at immigration court, and I saw a 5-year-old boy representing himself. He was so tiny, he didn't speak English. He was so scared and confused, standing in front of a judge by himself. I couldn't believe it. In the United States, how could a 5-year-old be expected to represent himself in court? That was the saddest thing I ever saw. In my 3rd year, I got selected for an immigration law internship working with Jojo. Unlike the attorney that handled my family's case, I watched Jojo give others hope and a fair chance to succeed in this country. He showed me what a good immigration attorney could do. I wanted to be a great immigration attorney, just like Jojo. So after I graduated from law school, I applied to the Immigrant Justice Corps and got in. To this day, I have a voicemail from Judge Katzmann welcoming me to the fellowship's historic maiden voyage. Immigrant Justice Corps changed my life and my career. For the first time, I was surrounded with 24 other lawyers who had gone to the best schools in the nation and were equally passionate about helping immigrants. If only my family had had one of those attorneys on our side, our journey would have been so different. IJC gave me the opportunity to be a voice for families just like mine. Without IJC, I wouldn't have gotten the training I needed to become the kind of immigration attorney I had always wished my family had. And thanks to IJC, 5-year-olds don't have to represent themselves anymore. My fellowship with Immigrant Justice Corps gave me a unique set of legal education and experience, which laid the foundation for professional opportunities. After I left my placement at the Door Legal Services Center, I was a staff attorney at the Bronx Defenders for 4 years, before returning to IJC as a supervising attorney. Currently, I supervise community fellows placed at the Chinese American Planning Council, and I am in charge of IJC's removal defense docket. My clients, mostly families, have fled violent countries where they escaped terrible, heartbreaking abuse. Without our help, they would have been forced to return. They came here with big hopes and dreams, but instead found legal trouble. But I was proof that their dreams could come true, and the fact that my journey was just like theirs gave them hope. I know what it's like to be lost in this country and live in constant fear. I know what it's like to get sick and not be able to pay for treatment because you can't get insurance. I know what it's like to do everything right and not be able to go to college because you can't apply for financial aid. We didn't come here to be a burden. Like many of you, we came here to build a better life, and we worked hard for it. My mother was a housekeeper, a nanny, a nurse's assistant, and now a medical equipment technician. And my sister is a nurse. America is the land of freedom and opportunity because people here are willing to fight for others and open doors. That's what Immigrant Justice Corps does. That is what Judge Katzmann made possible. And this is why it's imperative that we keep his legacy alive and continue to grow and train more lawyers and advocates who give immigrants like me and my family a fighting chance. Thank you.